Like all right. So today's topic, a little different than some of my other topics. If I am not mistaken, this is the first topic where there is a promise in the title and conditions on that promise. And that promise, which is also chapter lecture title, is How to Learn Anything Faster Without Needing to Be Able to Think Faster. So it's very specific. So whatever list you have that isn't learning related, well, this isn't part of that list. So there's going to be a lot of stuff that's true in other places, in other contexts, in other presentations, that is differently applicable. So don't confuse one with the other to say that because something is not true always, that it is not optimal in a very specific setting, specifically the setting of learning. So I'll start with the definitions. How to learn anything faster. Now that's the first sentence, and then the second sentence is without having to think faster. I'll do the second sentence first because it's easier. The second sentence is without having to think faster, meaning none of this has to do with the way that you were born. None of this has to do with your brain in terms of what you just are and are not capable of comprehending. None of this has to do with the hand you were dealt unless you had a railroad spike through your brain and you're physically missing the part of it that connects one part to the other. So if you have an average human brain that is not malfunctioning severely and lacks the physical capacity to do its job, this lesson is part of that. So that's the first thing, is without having to think faster. That means because you're not thinking faster, the answer is still inside you and it becomes much more specific. Because you can learn faster by thinking faster. That's a different tool. People who think faster use that tool. But there's more than one way to skin a cat. And just because you can physically make your vehicle go faster doesn't mean that you aren't doing many things that take your journey and make it take longer than it should or has to. So when I say that, I mean you pull the same information out. The only variable is time. And then if you're measuring effective use of time, you would say that someone who learns something twice as fast as somebody could learn twice as much in the same amount of time. Or they could goof off half as much. But so that's the first thing is, when it comes to learning, not everybody gets the same amount. Welcome to being human. It's a Pareto distribution. There's a distribution, a standard distribution of how much people can learn without trying hard. Anything a person can learn to do, or anything a person can do by accident, is a thing that anyone with the same body and brain machine can learn to do on purpose. It's very specific. It's possible because the hardware is there. It is a hardware emergent property, your thoughts. You don't exist without your brain and nervous system the way we understand it now. And certainly you can't change the way you exist the way we understand it now without that hardware because, well, that's what moves everything as far as we understand. And if things happen after we're gone, we can probably say that our bodies won't have anything to do with that at all. Whether we're aware of that or not, fingers crossed, right? Hoping for a good afterlife where all this hard work and crap pays off. But at the very least, if you're feeling better on your trip there, well, that's progress on its own. Different topic. So that's the first thing is everybody is included, and if you are smart enough to say why you are not included, you are smart enough to say why, you are smart enough to figure this out. So your objection is evidence that you're wrong in this specific instance, which is why that's half the title. without having to think faster? All right, so anybody can do it. That's what I mean by without having to think faster. It's not a special club. Okay, how to learn anything faster? Well, there's a few words in there. Anything. Start with that one because it's easy. Anything. If you can think of a possible way to learn it. I am only going to be talking about things that are true for learning anything, which is why it helps you learn faster, because I'm teaching the tricks that are not specific to a specific discipline. I am saying that the discipline of learning is a specific discipline that anyone with time and effort can recognize, map, and improve, because it's very A plus B plus C, the way that we understand information. It just doesn't feel that way. And we've spent the previous 20-some episodes explaining why it doesn't feel that way. So we're not going to focus on that part right now. I'm assuming if you're on this episode, you're up to speed with the rest of it.
I feel like this is heavily rooted in Stoicism.
We'll see. We'll see. I haven't studied Stoicism, so I really don't know what it is or how to explain it. I probably have many concepts of Stoicism that are strong and stable. If I do remember one thing about Stoics is that they have a disgust sensitivity to emotion. So I wouldn't be a very happy Stoic because I'm not disgusted by my feelings. I actually think that they're half of the equation. If I'm remembering Stoicism correctly, they don't like feelings. Is that true? Yeah. They're always talking about the positive aspects of feelings, those Stoics.
Stereotypically, that's true. Then it's defendable.
Well, sure. If you're
more about control than disgust.
An idea is just moving in the same direction as it. So if that direction is away from emotion, then defending Stoicism would also be moving away from emotion with logical cause. The only point that I make is if you get good enough doing that, you're honest enough with your measurements, and you keep going the same direction, eventually you will use your logic to build what you decided didn't matter at all. But that's a different topic. We covered that on the self-defeating nature of axioms. That's, if you understood that, any idea that you understand loops back around on itself if you're honest about the borders. If your idea is infinite, you're lying to yourself. We covered that in fallacies and bias. So, how to learn
vast versus infinite.
What's that? Okay.
Vast versus infinite.
Yes.
Something that I'm getting from the Monday night lectures is that you would likely appreciate a little bit more direction and energy from me. My worry before was that it would throw you off, which it does at times when I have a thought that may lead to a tangent, but I think I know more of the little interjections that'll help the bomb be built and their energy flow.
Like if I had to analyze what's going on, I'm reminded of somebody that I'm training right now, and it was fascinating because he has a brain like mine, so it's easier for me to spot the similarities. He was me 10 years ago. He doesn't know the social algorithms, but he has the ability to see and understand them. He's confused and highly anxious. He's ADHD, OCD. So it's pretty much, I met myself 10 years ago. And so I'm helping this kid, and it's great because in 3 months, he's grown more than I did in 10 years. But that's because the hard part for guys like us is not figuring things out, it's knowing where to look. So he's got this little devil or angel on his shoulder, depending on which one he needs at the time, saying, look over here, go over there. And then once it's there, he gets it, maps it, expands it, and done. But here was a thing that I noticed was happening. And one of the key components that's missing is ego in this. And this ties a little bit to learning because he was having a hard time learning things. So ego ties into personal development. And I particularly mean the positive aspects of ego, the self-confidence, the ability to remain yourself despite what's happening around you. That's, he's missing that. But what I've noticed is I told him how to get around that. I said, if you have a feeling, ask why. And so he started doing that. But he's also started doing that with me. So I will have a feeling and he'll ask me why. And then I'll answer and he'll say, why? Why? Like a kid almost. Why? And it either ends until I get down to what I feel is bedrock, or if he kind of runs out of questions, it ends with a joke. And I make a joke and give him an easy way out of it. All well and good, but then after about 2 weeks, I realized he's using me as a stand-in for something he can't do himself yet. He's practicing questioning his feelings by questioning mine. And one of the things that I've noticed, Tony, that you seem very interested in is the way that I triangulate information and find stable relevance. And so it would make sense that the ways that you would want to explore that would be jumping all around, or either that's natural and there's a subconscious pull towards how the hell does he do that? Let me try it again. So it's almost like pushing a button and watching a trick happen that you don't understand, but the trick never loses its appeal, because once you think you've got one side of it figured out, something else is said that seems to contradict it all, and you're like, well, what the hell, or where am I at? So I think that both of us, and people in general, which is the cognitive quantum entanglement lecture, are seeking things that we can see in others but can't do ourselves.
I just need to put this medicine in my friend's mailbox. So
That's
10-second break.
That's okay. I'm just going to keep doing the definition. So how to learn anything faster? Well, we talked about anything. Anything is anything that can be learned, which is a lot of things, actually. You can learn the right things. You can learn the wrong things. You can learn stuff that's not true. So it's a guarantee that you're going to learn correctly. But this actually works pretty well when combined with some of the other lectures about how to measure if you are wrong. So if you know how to find out when you're wrong, because you learned how to check your measurements from the previous lectures, and you learned how to learn anything faster, guess what? You're going to get really good at knowing when you're wrong early, as opposed to wasting a lot of time and figuring it out after. Well, there's a sunken cost fallacy temptation that comes along with that, because you put too much time in now to back out. So there's that aspect of it. Time is money. Time is life. You can do and should do what you can with it, but some people will and can and will show you they know how to do more. Evolutionarily speaking, the people who can do more will have more. The people who can see more will get more. The people who can understand more will build more. Those are your emperors and your kings and your politicians and your presidents. More your bankers, though. Bankers are smart enough not to get involved in the public eye. They pay for that. Somebody else has that job. They get to remain anonymous because there's no elections for bankers, but the check's still clear. But keep that in mind as well once you think about social hierarchies and power and what that looks like. Actual power is not visible. Visible power is a show. That's just an aside. That's useful though. If you see power and you think it's bad, you're being distracted. If you see power and you're being told it's bad, you're being lied to. If you don't know what's going on and nobody's saying anything, that's where the power is. And anyone who asks what's going on, watch the reaction to those people and see how they're handled. You'll know who has the power, because they're the ones who need to turn it off and on. But that's a digression again. So how to learn anything faster. Now, I covered all those words. So how to learn anything faster without having to think faster. Easy enough. So let's talk about learning. We'll go right down to kindergarten. Learning a thing is being able to understand a concept or an idea that you had no awareness of before. So that's what it looks like when learning a thing goes from 0 to not 0. It's a very specific moment. It's like the Big Bang. In physics, if you go back to the Big Bang, all the current laws of physics break down because there was no time before the Big Bang, because time and space were created at the Big Bang. So the story goes, which means you can't ask what happened before the Big Bang. It's like saying, how long did you microwave soup for before the microwave was invented? You can ask that question and use those words, but structurally, the causality is wrong. The time needs to exist before you can measure with it, is the main point. And because of the way time behaves with space and mass and speed, you really can't make statements about objective time in the physical universe, especially not at the singularity. I didn't make these rules, but the fact that your GPS doesn't break is proof that they're right. So science lessons aside, the metaphor is what I'm getting at with the Big Bang. Zero to not zero. Creation from nothing. That is what learning is. When you encounter a topic that was previously unknown. So learning is in essence our ability to digest and dismantle the unknown. It's a feeding process. Consciousness feeds on learning directly. And consciousness is a picky eater because it won't be satisfied when it's eating something it's had before. It'll be sustained, but it will be hungry because consciousness doesn't work the way physical mass does. It's not like you have an idea store that you run to and you go buy a box of this one idea and you put it in your cupboard and you keep track of how long that box is going to last before you have to go out and buy more. That's not how ideas work. You have the idea. It's in your brain. You might lose it, but it's there and it doesn't go away once you put it there. So when it comes to learning, consciousness behaves like a hoarder. And I would go so far as to say, when somebody starves their consciousness, they become deranged. They become neurotic. They become victims. They become angry, indiscriminately angry, violent, frustrated, unsympathetic. They become assholes. Well, that's what people do when they're in pain. You want to find a group of nice people, and you want to find a group of mean people, and you want to find them in the same room. Go to a hospital and find the people who are on strong painkillers. Find the people who aren't, and see which one of them is nicer. Just because it's a physical owie and that I can see it doesn't make it any more painful than the stuff people have carried around inside them all the time. That pain is equivalent. That self-torture is equivalent. And it gets to the point where the part that is producing the pain goes numb. And it doesn't turn off, because that's not how consciousness works. Because consciousness is sensing a void. That's where the pain comes from. Something's missing in my mental map. 1 and 1 does not add up. 1 and 1 is 3 when I do it. 1 and 1 is also 7 when I do it. 1 and 1 is also 9 when I do it. But everyone else is wrong. That's what happens when consciousness is starved. So the first way to understand learning is to understand what learning is. It's a type of food. That's a very good metaphor for learning, because everybody knows how to eat. And eating is a diverse enough collection of human behaviors that it lends itself well to specific metaphor. So we've done cooking so many ways that the one way I can explain how cooking has been done just so happens to be a very good analogy for what we're talking about right now. So that's kind of where I'm going to transition the conversation to, is knowledge is food, specifically food for consciousness. And I don't mean that in the sense that it's a good idea. I'm not talking about it as in it's optional. It's not optional. If you ignore it, it will consume you the way that your body consumes your muscles if you don't eat. Your body will cannibalize itself all the way down to the brain stem, if it must, to keep itself going. Which is why people can exist as 90, 80-pound skeletons with failing kidneys and this and that, but their brains still work, and they're still people, and they still have feelings, and they're not like, they're not less of a person because there's less of a person. The body knows how to prioritize the stuff that makes you unique, or at least the stuff that is intrinsic to whatever it is that being human and being consciousness means. Like, your whole body is not designed to keep your body alive. Your body is designed to keep your mind alive. That's very important. Your body doesn't care at the end of the day if it has to make a choice between losing 2 arms and 1 kidney versus losing your brain.
Isn't that a false dichotomy? I know that's a little stick semantic that is way below our regular level.
Which one specifically? Because I may have been making a measurement.
The false dichotomy of your body is not alive to preserve your body, it's alive to preserve your brain.
That's a different way of saying is that all pot pies are pot pies. So what I'm saying is that there's a nested effect where if your brain goes, your body goes first. Your body goes next, regardless. If your body goes first, your brain might live on. So because that is reality, the body has evolved or been constructed, depending on who you ask, to specifically recognize that order of operations in terms of prioritizing which systems get resources during crisis and when. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So it's kind of like, it's also saying that when it's raining outside, it's going to be raining outside. So it's very much a non-statement, but it's a non-statement that works in one direction very well. So yeah, that's kind of it's a lazy measurement, but it's meant to be a focusing. I'm talking about it in terms of social algorithms. Those types of apparent false dichotomies, sometimes I put them there as focusing agents. Meaning this is a landmark, this is a vibe, this is a thing, to where if I repeat this 2 or 3 times, I know we're on the same page.
I got that.
But that's good that you're starting to spot that. Like, that is a relevant point. I don't think you asked me that question when we met.
I've asked it in different ways before, and you've given me different answers before.
Understand what you meant. Well, that's good. It means your language skills are getting better, if not your ideas. Your ideas, I can't tell if they've improved or not since we met, but your language skills have been getting much better. Because I can't measure a change if I don't understand. It would be impossible. So how to learn anything faster. So the first thing is how we process new information, and it's like food, and it's not optional. It's a resource that your mind uses to give itself power. And like I said, it's almost like Pokemon cards for your brain. It's not a one and done. Like if you eat the same thing, meaning you think the same thoughts all the time, go and find people like that. They're usually not happy. Or they're so happy that they're not doing anything because they're drooling on themselves and they're shit in their pants. And you know what? Maybe that's a great way to live. But if I'm not there on accident in that perfectly sweet spot, there's maybe stuff I'd like to get up and do in addition to having all of these other things. So that's the first thing, is information is a food source. So now when you look at that, now you can start to narrow down this vast field of infinity, right? Infinity is a monster. It's the unknown. Infinity is, if you talk about infinity, you're almost talking about nothing. Because both concepts are so thoroughly encompassing that nothing is excluded at all. So what's the point other than a self-defining concept? So different types of information presents itself differently. I think there's a passage in the Bible where you wouldn't, and I'm butchering the wording and the story, but I remember the gist of it. So the gist is what's important. So please leave your Bible verse annotation properly notated later on without the
I'll help you out if you
Bible
need me
missing
to.
remark. You wouldn't give a baby an adult's meal because their digestive tract could not handle it. I had a pastor one time who said, you don't give a baby a T-bone steak. Not when they're born. Number one, they're gonna choke. And number two, that's not what their body needs at that time. It's too much, way too concentrated. So looking at the food chain is a very good way to understand the caloric density of the ideas you are trying to learn. So some ideas are easy. Some ideas are very hard. Some meals are light. Some meals are very dense and you can only eat a little bit. Some meals need to be chewed for a long time. Some meals need to be served at the right temperature. And if you go into the way your tongue understands flavors, and if you go into food science, and this is a different topic, maybe I'll do a one-off on the anatomy of consciousness inside cooking. Because the way that we explore our senses is the way we understand consciousness. And there are shockingly easy to see metaphors for how we balance food dishes, which tie to the main receptors in your tongue, the sweet, the savory, the bitter, salty. And the way that they talk about balancing a dish in terms of you need a little vinegar here to bring out the blank. You need a little heat here to cover up for this. No meal is good if it's 100% Tabasco sauce. I don't care how much you like Tabasco sauce, you are not drinking that out of the bottle. And if you are, it is not leaving you the same as it entered you, because you will suffer for that. Nobody drinks a bottle of Tabasco without consequences at least a day after. So some uppance will come. So that's not to, don't take a bad idea as a challenge. Unless you are sure you can avoid the consequences that everyone is spelling out. So maybe you are a superhuman mental guy and you can live off of molten lava. Great. Don't try to feed that to your kids or people you care about. But the point is, your mental stomach, your ability to digest and decompose is not the same as everyone else's. And I'm going to get real in this lecture and say that because we are living beings, and because this is present everywhere in nature, some of us get more of it than others. Sorry. Some of us get it from our parents. Maybe they understand some of these rules on how to understand information. Some of them will be familiar and some of them will be specific. But maybe you had a good upbringing, which means that your social memory that we've talked about in previous lectures, the learned behaviors that are passed on through faith and emulation without understanding, just give you a leg up because you're doing the right thing, even if you don't understand how. Life is funny like that. You don't need to know why you succeeded. You certainly don't need to know why you failed for that to be possible. If you succeeded and it was luck, well, just be thankful that you didn't have to suffer for being wrong. You don't go back and try to re-engineer the situation so that you succeed the way you wanted to. How egotistical would that be? No, I got what I wanted, but it was wrong. Maybe you didn't want the right thing if getting it was wrong. If getting something the wrong way feels wrong, then you want something else. Because nobody who genuinely gets everything they wanted is upset in that moment. The buyer's remorse always comes after you have it, figure out it's not everything you thought it was cracked up to be. So that's that part of that. So now, when we talk about the different tolerances, you can see this. You can see this, and this is the difference between speed and wisdom, intelligence and wisdom. Remember, speed and compression. This is where you see that. This is your ability. That's your appetite threshold for each. How fast are you? How much simple crap can you eat? You know, we had something like that. Hummingbirds and cows, herbivores, things that fly around and live off lots of crap. But bats, they just eat all the time, and they eat little bits of things, and they're easily digestible to their little bat bodies and their giant cow bodies, I guess. But the point is, what they're eating is very small. But because they eat so much of it, they get enough calories to survive. Do you know how much calories it takes to run a cow? You know how many calories there are in grass? Do the math. You wonder how there's any grass left, at least where there's lots of cows. So the point is, by subsisting on a very simple diet regularly that is spread around, because remember, in the food analogy, you only get to eat a food once for consciousness for it to count. Once you've eaten it, it's gone. It gets added to your collective. You're not hungry for it anymore. You already had that. There's no void there. That's why there's a hunger, is there's something missing. And what's missing is what your subconscious mind tells you is missing, which is what we talked about in previous lectures about how to find that. So your subconscious mind will tell you you're hungry. And if you are smart enough to listen to it deeply and to learn the way that it understands your patterns, so that you can translate that weird inversion of sensation and concept in backwards order into your conscious mind, you can also learn what you're hungry for, which is a game changer. Being hungry and being hungry for something are very different things. One of them's hell, by the way, according to Dante. One of the circles of hell is ravenous hunger. And you can eat whatever you want, and you're never satisfied because you're eating the wrong things. You equate hunger with consumption. And that's not what hunger does. That's what hunger does for people. Because humans have this crazy garbage disposal system that can turn a hamburger that's 20% particle board into energy somehow. And even though it is literally a step above dog food, some of the stuff that we are fed on a mass scale, your body, the miracle machine that it is, it can take that pile of shit and keep you alive for decades. It's not without consequence. You're going to have all sorts of cancer and other health-related problems toward the end, but for 40 or 50 years, you're not going to know the difference at all. So that's not to say that you won't be alive, but that is to say that when you eat food, you're satisfied because there's a physical thing that needs to be cleared. Like whether you ate the right thing or not, your option to choose to eat again is limited. Unless you have bulimia, and then you should get help. Because, well, it doesn't do you any good to eat something if you're just going to throw it back up. That's adrenaline seeking. That's self-distrust. Disgust sensitivity to body image to the point where you can't look at yourself. Yeah, that's a bad road to go down. But guess what? How many mental bulimics have you met? Where they'll take one bite of an idea, maybe even say that it was good, and then later on, when nobody's around, they eject everything about that idea from themselves, including a sense of disgust for having to ingest it at all. Now that's difficult to measure with ideas because the time scale is different. We're used to digestion taking 12, 24, 36 hours. If you're having one poop a day, you're doing all right. That's what the doctors say. If you're having less than one poop every 2 days, you got to figure something else out. Or resign yourself to a life of getting your ass checked by a doctor, because that's the end of that road. I don't care what you do with your poop, but that's the two options. Make it so you poop every day on your own, or get a doctor to help you with your ass for the last 20 or 30 years of your life. The choice is yours. But so that's such a long timeline that this metaphor can be like, well, no, that just doesn't matter at all. All the steps are there. It's just compressed down into how fast we can react to our reactions. That's the first gatekeeper. The amygdala is the gag reflex. So, step one. Step one in learning how to learn anything faster is to learn how to mentally deep throat information. It won't kill you. And it only chokes if you struggle. So I've heard.
Yeah, you can't convince my wife to do anything.
So, well, I'm not going to get involved there. You're just a bad negotiator, if that's true. There's a list of things in this universe that will get you that goal. I don't know what they are, what they look like, or what order they need to be followed in, or what the consequences of attempting such a specific path and failing would be. But I will say, there must be one perfect path that takes you from here to your goal, and it probably looks like nothing you'd recognize, or you'd have it already.
Yeah, it's not a high enough priority to put energy into, for sure.
So, well, Tony's deep throating problem aside, we will continue this crass metaphor because it's very, well, life works this way. How many successful organisms do you know that don't reproduce? No, they do. Otherwise, that's the literal definition of success for an organism, according to how their bodies seem to work. We're designed to have a thing, to do some stuff, and to pass it on. If you really get down and simplify it, we're born, we learn, we grow, we eat, we mess stuff up, we fuck, we reproduce, and we die. So we'll give you a little whiplash if you're in your mid-40s, but
I don't know if this is going to throw you off or not, but I just so happened to have watched a video last night about ants and how there's a species of ant that there's a third gender, which is a female gender, born without reproductive organs, for the sole purpose of destroying all the males that they can. They don't have any reproductive organs. I don't know how they choose to form, but yeah, they don't have reproductive organs. They just have two big old horns, and they just run around the nest trying to kill all the guys.
That's fascinating. I've met some women like that, and some men. You think they look like a Ken doll underneath, and all they try to do is seek and destroy. But anyways, to continue the metaphor, and I apologize for the appropriateness of this metaphor. I didn't make the metaphor be what it is. I just recognize that's what it was. The language of the amygdala is fourfold, if you get simple enough, and we'll keep it simple because you can dissect these into further things, but everything that's true about these core branches remains true further down, which is why I don't mind simplifying it to here. Fight, flight, feed, and fuck. That's how you understand towards and away at your core. Do I move towards this or do I go away from it? Well, I don't know because it's unknown. What do I do? Let's run it through the test. Do I want to fight it? Do I want to run from it? Do I want to eat it? Do I want to fuck it? Okay, that's your reaction. That happens in a minute. Now, if you were to take the emerging metaphor, the consumption metaphor, those two things go together when you learn. Okay? Learning is two parts. It is creation, boundary, and ingestion. So it's a separate, logically bound piece of code that exists. Call it the DNA of the idea. There's a specific X, Y, and Z that makes that idea what it is. and you figure that out, then that idea becomes yours. Well, how does that happen? Well, you remember it. Well, what happens? It literally becomes a part of you. So when you have an idea, you are learning how to reproduce with yourself to create a stronger offspring. The only difference is you're the same thing before and after. You can feel the process as it goes on, which is why it hurts sometimes, because you're changing. Dead things don't feel pain. Changing things do. So how to learn anything faster then? So that's the first part, is recognizing what information and ideas and learning is. And it's an acquisition. So I'm going to speak of it as a genetic thing, where you are the fertile thing in this. You are the soil. You're the ground, okay? You're the thing that needs to be joined with that will produce whatever that is. The idea is the other half of that. And when it's done right, you can look before and after and see elements of the idea present in a person that were not present before. Best examples of this that are the easiest to find are people who successfully complete therapy. Those people produce a condition which is good for growth. They go to therapy. They receive specific ideas that are intended to interact with that state of mind, i.e., what the therapist has them talk about. And if those ideas are understood by the person and their issues are sorted out, what grows is that person's ability to become those missing parts of themselves that are giving them so much trouble. So that's one example of how that works. But it works in different directions too. Especially if you don't know what's going on. You can have an idea forced on you. And I'll tell you how that happens. So there's
Inception?
No. There's one group of people that is vulnerable to having ideas forced on them. And that is anybody who understands how their feelings make them react to things less than they do. And that's a scale. If you have kids, it's easy. Clean up or the monster under your bed will get you. You say that right, they're going to listen. But they're not always going to listen. Why? Because they get smarter. So then what do? Well, you better clean up your act or you're not going to get a car. Whoa. Well, you know what? You better do what I say or people are going to die. Put that mask on, take that injection, go to that rally, do that thing, vote for this thing, buy this product. If a person does not understand how their reactions make them react, meaning how specific looking road signs always work unless you figure out that there is road beyond where the sign tells you not where to go. If you only go where the reactions take you, which is the vast majority of individuals all the time, including me, and the only way to get out of it is to stop what you're doing and measure it again 3 times. That's how you step outside yourself. There's not a different way, not if you're doing it right. 3 times, minimum calibration to figure out, is it you? Is it how you're reacting, or is it something else? Anything less than that is how you know you're talking to someone who doesn't get it. So anyone who skips to the end of a conversation in one point tells you exactly how deeply they understand it. In much the same way, all shirts have shirt sleeves and a hole for your head. That person puts on their shirt faster, but their head comes out and there's no holes for the arms. And they say they've got it. No, it's this. It's obviously this. Look, I'm doing it right now. I look at what you're doing and you're a dude with his head. You look like a dude with his head poking out of the top of a sock. You got no arms, no ability to affect anything at all, except you're a moving mouth. Great. But you can tell by what's missing what is and isn't understood. What movie was that? Demolition Man. How do I use the shells? You know, somebody's not around from around here if they don't know how to use the shells. You don't need to understand anything more about them because that is such a basic part of what it means to use that facility, that if you don't understand it, something much deeper is wrong than you just don't understand a thing. Because you really should, if you're claiming to know what you're talking about at all. That's the general idea. So I can talk about basketball all day. I'm an expert. I know exactly what a field goal is. And I know about blocking the passer too. Yep. I know all about basketball. And when Deion Sanders got 50 points for the Jets in the East Coast Finals, that was a game, man. I remember that like it was just, so you can tell he's using all the right words. He's kind of in the same area of professional sports, but you don't need to say a damn thing to know what's wrong and why, based on what they're giving you, measurements, etc. So that's what the 1-point measurement system looks like. That's an exaggeration. But it's always true when there's only 1 point of measurement to some degree. So it's not if, it's how much and when. And is that okay? Are you willing to be imprecise in one area because you know it gives you certainty in another, and you're acknowledging that imprecision and cutting that function out of whatever you're trying to produce? Is it a premeditated lack of precision? Or is it a natural lack of precision because you don't really understand the other half of the argument you're trying to make? And it's like a house of cards that keeps falling down because one of the pieces is missing, but you don't know which one. So not understanding a precise measurement is being made, and making one on purpose are also two very different things. That's a digression. Do that a lot. So how to learn faster then? So what does that mean? The first thing is recognize that there are different levels of density for the food and figure out which one is right for you. Okay. The types of ideas that you can handle is directly related to your neuroticism score. Direct correlation. There are few ways to figure out who will be able to learn faster than to look at a person's neuroticism score. And why don't I say intelligence first? Well, the reason I say that is because it doesn't matter how smart you are if you can't use it. And neuroticism is the stop button. No, I don't believe you. I don't understand. No, it's not relevant. It's not true. Why are you wasting my time? Why are you talking about that? What's the matter with you? Everybody knows it's this. Here's why you're wrong. That's neuroticism. And if that's happening to people outwardly, it's also happening to you inwardly. Because people don't act like assholes on purpose. They act the only way they know how, and some people only know how to act like assholes. It's a very different thing. Finding someone who's an asshole on purpose with premeditated knowledge is a difficult thing. Finding someone who is very bad at being a good person and thinks they're doing their best and thinks they're doing a good job is a lot more common. So neuroticism is the first thing. When you are learning, you need to be learning. That sounds like a simple enough, stupid statement. That's almost a truism. But what I mean by that is, if you are learning, you are not questioning what you are learning in that moment. That's a different step. You don't question a thing until you understand it. Because how can you question a thing you don't understand? That's a hypothetical question that I asked, but it sure as hell doesn't stop people from trying all the goddamn time. And we've gone into other episodes of this series as to why that happens. It's avoidance at its core. I don't want to. And if you think that that's made up, keep trying. When somebody says no, be as gentle as you want. See how many times it takes for them to get angry. Versus, no, it's not a big deal. My brain is fully capable of having this idea, but I refuse to let it. That's neuroticism. So the first step to recognizing that is not to say, oh no. And so this is a false dichotomy that can pop up when I say that, because neurotic people, obviously, are going to react strongly to people pointing at their own neuroticism by definition. They don't like vulnerabilities being pointed at. They don't like seeing where they measure up and fall short. And they react unstably to that. It's a validation centric issue. It's a discussed sensitivity for lack of control. So what do you do about that? Do you just divide people up into groups and say you're allowed to learn and you're allowed not to learn? That's kind of what we do now by not doing much with it at all. But the people are the ones who decide they want to learn, and the people decide they don't want to learn. But that's only because the system we have really only rewards people who want to learn. Now that's a tall topic right there. But yeah, you haven't been taught how to learn. That's number one. Why? If I wanted things to stay exactly the same and I had infinite money, the only thing that could change that is if people learn things that were new. And I wouldn't know what those things would be. But I do know that if everything is how I like it right now, so long as everything stays the same, I should get to keep what I have right now. And if I'm a human being and I'm rich and, well, maybe I've only got 20 years left, I'm not going to care what you're going to be like 30 or 40 years after I'm gone. I'll be dead. I won't be able to care. After you're gone, you won't be able to care either how I felt about that. If you still care about how you were treated after you die, you lived your life wrong. Because that's hell. Digression. So the point is, it's neuroticism based. It's a sensitivity based. It's frustration based. It's discussed at your own weakness based. That's what gets in the way of learning more than anything else. So if you can't make yourself smarter, which is why the second half of this title exists, without having to think faster, you have to know how to use the tools you've got. And so now we're going to dive into that. Information is food, and there's different caloric density. So find out what works for you. Do you like little ideas before you get frustrated? Does it need to be short and sweet? A plus B plus C. Can I look at a picture and learn what's on that picture? Can I watch a video and learn what's in that video? Okay, well, maybe I can. Let's say that I can. Two people watch the same video. Two people might learn the same thing. Let's say that the other person, one of the people, needs to watch it twice. Well, they get to the same place by the end, and one person had to work twice as much. Depending on why it took them twice as long to get through it, you might have your answer as to why you couldn't learn as fast as the other guy did by watching the video all the way through. What stopped you? So that's the first thing, is you need to troubleshoot your learning process. You need to learn, practice learning, and don't pay attention to what you're learning, or at least not completely. Pay attention to how long you get distracted from what you're learning. Pay attention to things that happen that make you walk away. What makes you put the book down? Where do you reach your breaking point? How easy is that? Is it like a child running from a picture of a monster in a pop-up book where the mere sight of it does an about face? You've got a hypersensitive mental gag reflex if that's going on. Get some Vaseline and switch to non-solid food. If you have a hypersensitivity to words, you're emotionally stunted and you need baby food. And crying for steak isn't going to make you able to eat one. Because the people in this world who really get things done aren't the people who cry. They're the people who do. So unless you can do and cry at the same time, You're a glorified siren, and really there only needs to be one of you to get the job done if everyone else is paying attention. Or if people are paying attention perfectly fine and see that you're causing your own mess by all of your whining and crying and draining resources from people by asking them to do things that you can't, well, they're going to treat you like that's true. And however good you are at blaming them for that will determine how miserable you are. Because the better you are at blaming other people, the longer you'll be able to live like that and starve yourself out. It's actually a pretty cool defense mechanism for keeping that line of consciousness from propagating fully. But then it becomes parasitic in nature and viral in nature, if you really want to continue the metaphors, where interactions with others can actually take parts of their broken code and mangle other people as well. And really what that is it's a strong presentation of ego of that mangled code that hits somebody else with a weak ego in that part of their emotional spectrum, and it destabilizes it entirely because the force was too strong and there was nothing else there to hold it together, which is why different people can suffer the same tragedy and have different outcomes. Some people will be fine, some people will be a wreck, some people might die from shock, everything in between. But it's the same stimuli, different tolerance. So the first thing is find your mental tolerance for how much you can stand being stupid and work on it. Because that is the number one thing that will stop you from learning faster, is caring that you feel stupid. And watch how fast it happens when other people suggest that for you. You're doing a thing, you're happy. Oh, that's dumb. What are you wasting your time for? What's the matter with you? You're an idiot. Who goes on and who stops? Depends who it is, but you've seen both. That person was so sensitive to feeling stupid that they abandoned everything they were doing because someone else was looking at it and said the wrong word. Tell me that doesn't get in the way of learning. Because it has to, because it's something else than learning. And if you are not learning, you're doing something else. And if you're doing something else, you are not learning. Humans can only do a limited number of things at a time. And learning and running away from information are incompatible. So, how to learn anything faster? The first thing is you have to recognize at your core towards or away. And you have to keep score. Measure it for a day. Forget the justifications. Forget the reasons. That's fallacy and bias all over. That's a layering of good and evil, morality, Nietzsche, etc. All of those ideas we've covered before. Cut the bullshit out and skip to the data. How many times did I go towards what I was working on to try and learn in 30 minutes? And how many times did I move away from it? How many times did I check my phone? How many times did I get up to go to the bathroom? How many times did I fill up Facebook messages? How many times did I pause the video? How many times did I skip and learn something else? How long could it have taken you? How long did it take you? How much do you remember? Are you satisfied that you got through it, or are you happy it's done? Towards or away? So how to learn anything faster without having to learn how to think faster is to learn how to think towards. Not is this relevant? How is this relevant? Not is this important? When is this important? Not do I understand this? Who would understand this that could explain it to me better? Is this stupid? How is it smart? If you want to find some of the most brilliant ideas that you would never think of, find the dumbest motherfucker you can and ask him a question that he answers honestly. he will give you a nugget of truth that makes sense to him, and it has to be good because he's an idiot. Remember, that's the definition. So it's not a judgment. You find a statistical idiot, and they understand the world very simply. But maybe the way they understand it is so simple, but they're conscious and they're human and they're amazing, which means they found a way to not die, which means they have enough of the bigger picture figured out that whatever they've got has elements of truth in it. And because there's so little of it, the parts of it that it can be are diminished. Diminished in terms of the number of places to look. Redneck wisdom is a phrase that you hear. I think hillbilly wisdom, that's it. Hillbilly wisdom. That's what I'm talking. That is real. That shit is real. You find the right hillbilly, and you will answer any question you've ever had about yourself. But not if you're too disgusted by where he lives. Not if you're disgusted by the cigarette ash can that's overflowing on his armchair. Not if you don't appreciate the fact that he makes his own moonshine. And these are all stereotypes. We could pick a different person to hypothetically pick on, but white people are pretty safe to pick on. Nobody seems to give a shit about when we pick on them. So they're a good target for me. So the hillbilly redneck wisdom, well, I've been that guy. So I dare you. Point is, how to learn anything faster without having to think faster is number one, you have to defeat the gatekeeper. And the gatekeeper is you. And your gatekeeper only understands open or closed, more or none. Fix it. Learn how to open the door on your own. Don't time your life based around when it's open and closed. Other people can open that door, so can you. And if you think you can't, well, you're right. If you think other people can't because you can't, go fuck yourself. Do some work on yourself, because your limit is not everyone's limit. And crying about why that's not fair only takes away time you could be using to get out of it yourself, because no one's coming. Let me tell you that right now. Nobody gives a shit if you waste your life, because there's too many of us. And the only reason I say that is to kill the part of you that's lying to you about that. There is no list of things other people could do. There is no collection of laws that could be passed. There is no list of words that people could be forced to say or not say that will fix your life for you. You'll have buyer's remorse if you think that's true, because it will never be enough. Work on your gag reflex. That's number one. Now that we've got past that, because that's the biggest one, by far, if you can do that and nothing else. Tony, take a guess. How much will your learning power double? Fuck, never mind. I was going to say, how much did you think your learning power would increase? But I said the answer instead. I failed you, Tony. I set you up with no possible chance of success because I failed before I got to you.
The way I see it, you set me up. The way I see it, you set me up with no plan for failure.
So my fault. The point is, you fix the gatekeeper, your learning speed doubles. And that's not hyperbole. That's not an approximation. That's not saying it gets really fast. That is an exact measurement. Because your gatekeeper is designed to get rid of half the information you don't like. The literal doubling. Everything you understand because you want to, there's another half of it that you don't want to understand. And it's there. So that's the doubling part. So now, how do we improve that? Because that's just one. Double is great. But you know what's better than double? More than double. So I'm going to give you some tricks now. You will notice that without your level of neuroticism stopping you, types of food you can eat become more dense, which means You can learn about a thing by learning about things about that thing. Meaning, and I'll give you a crazy example because it's possible, because it exists in the real world, so it has to be. If I understood enough about atoms, how they interact, how they come together, what sorts of chains they could combine, all of the different combinations, et cetera, et cetera. If I understood that well enough, I could predict without ever having seen it, a chicken egg. I could arrange this hypothetical collection of the appropriate molecules that would make this thing. How do I know that's possible? Because chicken eggs are real. And they're made of molecules. And they all pop out more or less the same with variations on shape and size. So it's already happening, is the proof that it's possible. My point is that if I understood what that egg was made of to a sufficient degree of precision, I don't need to understand the egg because I understand everything that happens with carbon. Which one's more useful? Now, if I want to become an egg expert, maybe I do need that extra bit. But if I want to know a lot about a lot, then I learn about what everything shares. Don't learn how things are different. That's the other thing. So this is the second half. The first one is open the damn gate. The second one is stop focusing on what's wrong. Start focusing on what's shared. Because those are the only points that matter. When two people have led very different subjective lives, and those two people come to opinions that are different from one another, that are based on entirely different experiences, which we've mapped in other episodes. When those two people meet for the first time and discuss an idea that both of them are sharing for the first time, and each of them somehow has reached a shared perspective in very different ways, that means that two things are true. One, each of those people has enough of the bigger picture to get there. That's true. Each of those people has enough of the big picture to get them there and carry along a bunch of bullshit that doesn't matter to that point at all. Because those things are true, because they have to be, there's only one way to get there that's exactly there. But both of you recognize enough about where you are to say we see each other. Then becomes the process of combining the ideas to filling in the gaps, right? So first you need to know what's there, shared perspective, which is the mental gag reflex. Once that happens, now the merging of ideas happens. And you can say, what do we have in common? So when two people do this, you would have a conversation. How is this alike? The thing I already understand. And that's where stories and metaphors and language and definitions all come into play. Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
So-
I waited just for that one. Yeah.
I appreciate that. I appreciate your dedication to the bit. So now these two ideas have merged together. Well, what are you going to do? Are you gonna ask every list for everything that is not true to describe what is? Why don't you put those two things next to each other and just give me a relative size comparison? How big is a list of things that aren't true about what you think? And how big is the list of things that is true about what you think? One of them should be much larger than the other. The list of unknowns, hopefully. But when these two things happen, you say, what do we have in common? And how did you get there? Because that's when the process repeats. So not only has this person gotten past their gatekeeper and had one evolution, which is I can see something I didn't see before, which is the difference between 0 and not 0 for learning a new thing, which is critical. If the seed does not plant, exploration doesn't matter. And if the plants are only allowed to grow this tall before they're plucked out, well, then you're just wasting your time planting seeds at all because nothing's going to grow there. Mental gardening is too strong. So the shared aspects. So with two people, it's easy. What do we agree on? Okay, so we agree on this, but you explain it this way, and that's different from how I understand it. Explain to me why it's that way. And see, so what's happened then is you've begun a second cycle, that you're taking the second bite. So knowledge isn't absorbed in one interaction. That's the other thing. Nothing is absorbed in one interaction. Minimum is 3. So if you're talking to a new person about a new idea and you don't have at least 3 points of comparison by the end of your conversation, you didn't do anything. Except learn how to try better next time, because you didn't win. You're the same as you were before you left. Which is a thing I encounter, which is why you see me do very little engagement with people who question relevance all the time. Because most of the time, the questions of relevance are a mental gag regurgitation. Well, I don't want to talk about that. Oh, I don't see why that matters. Oh, why are you bringing that up? Oh, it's making me sick. 3 times they deny it, when once would have got the job done in a different direction. But because the choice was always away, doesn't matter how hard you try to bust that nut. You're going to clamp down. You're going to spit it right out. No one's going to be happy. Nobody. Not you, not them, not anybody who's watching. That's an ugly thing. And then this is one reason I do use the mating metaphor, is because I want to talk about consciousness and exchanges of consciousness in the language of sexuality, because consent is a topic that's important for sexuality, obviously, for obvious reasons. You do not want a thing put in you that you don't want put in you. You do not want to put a thing that you have somewhere you don't want it to go. And anytime this happens, there's damage. Especially if it's repeated, especially if it's violent, especially if there's no choice involved. If what you think doesn't matter, damage will be done if you have no way to leave. Which is why fight and flight exists, by the way. If that's happening, you run or you fight. Because what happens when you eat it or mate with it is you become damaged, because you take that into yourself. So people who have damaged fight and flight systems, they're going to merge with anything and they'll be fucked up, because they can't get mad. They can't say no. They can only get mad at themselves. So there's that side of it. But when I'm talking about ideas in general, I try to look at a person's perspective as their own body, and my perspective as an intrusion, if nothing else, to a similar space. Like I am entering a space that they've always been, and they're doing the same for me. That's what it means when two people have ideas together. Both of them are meeting in a way that they aren't meeting currently. So if you send that to a physical interaction, then all of the things that we understand about courtship become true about the way we exchange ideas, as simple as saying hello. And do you know who hates this way of thinking? Mental rapists. I say mental rapist because interacting with someone consciously to get what you need from them with no regard for what they think or feel on their own, it is literally coming up to somebody, taking what they have and not caring what you leave behind. And the loudest people who talk about sexual abuse, I wish were not such mental rapists at the same time, because they undermine their own message. If you talk about rape and you don't talk about healing, you're doing it wrong, making it worse. And that's what I believe about the exchange of ideas. At least that's the sanctity that I choose to give another person's perspective. Because the value of someone's perspective is their bias. That's the thing people don't understand. You see it differently than me. There's two questions that matter: how and why. Which one is more important? How. I can figure out why. Maybe my why is different than yours. If I know why you figured it out differently, then I can figure out other things you figured out using that same line of reasoning if I've never used it before, which is why I try to take the time to learn it, because it's useful. So having said all of that, let's wrap this up with the courtship metaphor, because when you do it wrong, you force yourself. You know what happens when you force yourself? People don't come back. People don't have a good time. People think you're an asshole. People think that you're abusive. You die alone. That's what happens. You take that path long enough. But that's when it goes wrong. Look at it the other side. What happens when two people who agree to share their intellectual intimacy with each other, their best ideas, their most uncertain thoughts, their most vulnerable conclusions about human nature and themselves and what it means to be a person? When those things are shared,
You build a bomb.
you build a bond. You said bomb, I say bond, depending on which way it goes. But those people now, well, they can still do everything that the first person did wrong. Functionally, meaning the mechanics of it don't change. There's insertion, there's exchange, etc. All of that still happens. And to put an ugly point on it, I would say that you can get pregnant from being raped. And then that usually doesn't end well for the baby. If that baby is allowed to live at all, usually the mother wants nothing to do with it. And if they do, it's a tough road. Look that up if you're curious about what it means to have a tough life. Find out what your odds are of surviving an abortion attempt if you were a rape baby. And then once you make it past that hurdle of being allowed to be born, how well does it turn out for you from there compared to other kids who didn't have that? Look that up. See, it's the same thing mentally. But when it's done right, and ideas happen and they can grow, well, guess what? You have kids, right? They're like ugly potato things when they're born, right? They can't do anything. They cry, they shit, they sleep, they get sick, they get ear infections, they break your stuff. When they get a little bigger, they learn how to smear poop on the walls. That's fun for a while. But even at the young stage, they're these ugly little things that require a lot of maintenance and upkeep and development. But when two people are there and one of them hasn't cut and run because, well, they know of the consequences of their actions and they're avoiding them by being violent that way. I made you feel bad. That means I got what I wanted, but I can't show my face to you again because it won't work twice. Why? Because the consciousness already ate that. Especially if it's like online or something, you just get blocked. If it's physical, then you need to get help because your mind can run away as much as you want, but your body will keep bringing you back. You got to get your mind and your body on the same page for that. But to close, when two ideas merge like that, and they are allowed that space to grow and develop, that's when they get stronger. They take root. They start to build on themselves and become these living entities that can do things on their own. That's a woodworking talent. I do woodworking. I can make objects that will be around after I'm dead now, that people will care about and use. And all of that came from me looking at these sharpened pieces of metal and learning how to take this sticky adhesive and these cylinder corkscrews and use them very specifically. So when it comes to learning, none of that happens if you spit. And none of that happens if you don't choose it on your own. So that's it. You have to choose it. You have to get over yourself. You have to be willing to say yes and most importantly, once all that is done, seek the common between the two. Do not seek the difference. And there you have it. If you want to skip to how to do both at once, find the equation for the boundary, which we taught you how to do in Axioms, and we taught you how to find the things to find boundaries for with the subconscious episode. So there you have it. How to learn anything faster without having to think faster. Tony, anything?
Nope, no questions again this week. All fits and makes sense. I feel like it had a little slower start than some of the others, but I feel like it also had a clearer bullet point than some of the others as well.
This is a tricky one because remember, I said this was a special one because it was a promise. So this one needed to read a little bit more like a how-to manual and a little bit less like a YouTube video about a topic, if that makes sense. So it's good to hear that that was received.
Sweet. I've got some printing to do before choir and whatnot, and the kids, and I'll see you in the dojo.
Thanks, man. See you Thursday.
See ya.